Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're trying to cut through some of the noise on a topic that, well, it feels incredibly complex, doesn't it? The future of the war in Ukraine. You've sent us a really compelling stack of sources. We've got analysis from Chatham House, the Lieber Institute, reports from The Independent, those revealing polls from Gallup too. And our mission really is to navigate these potential paths towards peace, maybe understand the true costs, the real costs involved, and maybe unpack why these choices echo so far beyond just the conflict zone. It impacts global stability, really. We're here to help distill what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the way ending this conflict gets discussed, it often sounds quite simple, but the reality is just layered with these profound implications. It's not just about Ukraine, as you said. It's about the bedrock principles of global order.
Yep.
We're looking past the headlines to figure out what peace might actually mean here and the strategic challenges that could come after any kind of agreement.
Exactly. And right off the bat, from the latest reporting, there's this really provocative idea gaining some traction, something our sources are highlighting. It sort of sets the stage, I think. It's the suggestion, well, that Ukraine should maybe sacrifice its own land for a supposed peace after 2.5 years of this grinding war. Fatigue is growing, the economic burdens are mounting, and some policymakers are apparently suggesting Ukraine should cede occupied territory to Russia just to end the fighting. But what are the long-term costs of doing that?
And this idea, this land for peace deal, perhaps brokered by figures like former President Trump, it does carry these significant risks. They go far beyond Ukraine's borders. Critics are warning quite loudly that this path wouldn't bring genuine peace. Instead, it actually rewards Russia's aggression.
Right. It sends a signal.
A very clear signal that, territorial gains you make by force can somehow be legitimized. And that move, well, it could unravel the international order we've known since World War II.
An order based on respecting sovereignty.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Respecting sovereignty and rejecting border changes imposed by force.
Imagine the ripple effect. Other nations, powerful ones with maybe imperial ambitions, they're watching closely.
They could be emboldened, couldn't they, to pursue their own territorial claims? We could see new conflicts sparking up from Asia to the Balkans.
And it also risks destroying global efforts on nuclear non-proliferation.
That's another huge risk. Countries might just conclude that only having nuclear weapons truly guarantees their safety.
This isn't just Ukraine's fight, then.
Not at all. It's about the future of global stability and whether appeasement actually prevents wider, maybe even more dangerous conflicts down the road. The economic and human cost of the war now is clear. Ukraine's GDP slumped massively, over 29% in 2022.
Wow.
But the price of a flawed peace could actually be far, far higher in the long run.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack right there. It brings up so many critical questions. So maybe first, what exactly are these different scenarios people are talking about for ending the war? What defines them?
It's interesting. Experts like John Loff at Chatham House, they identify broadly 4 main potential outcomes. You've got a long war, a frozen conflict, victory for Ukraine, and defeat for Ukraine.
Okay.
But the key thing here isn't just listing them. It's that none of these offer a simple fix. There's no easy way out. Each path forces Ukraine, and really the world, to grapple with these incredibly tough trade-offs.
Trade-offs between what? Stopping the fighting now versus
ensuring, lasting geopolitical stability. It's a balance with potentially huge long-term costs either way. And for Ukraine itself, any peace deal is going to hinge on 5 key things.
Which are?
How much territory it actually controls at the end, the full extent of the economic damage, the terrible population loss, its ability to maintain its own security after the fighting stops, and the level of investment truly needed for future defense and rebuilding.
Right.
And that Chatham House paper, it really emphasizes the huge challenge post-war Ukraine faces just to maintain unity, strengthen its institutions, and get economic growth going again.
And that's complicated by internal issues, too.
Very much so. Particularly deep-seated crony capitalism, that tangle of powerful business interests and political elites, that really needs dismantling for any genuine recovery.
So when we hear this talk of ceding territory, like you mentioned from The Independent and others, what specific areas are we actually talking about, and how does that map onto these scenarios?
Okay, so connecting the dots, those reports from The Independent, citing sources, suggest President Zelensky might be prepared to cede territory Russia currently occupies. We're talking about parts of 5 provinces, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and of course Crimea.
And how much territory is that, roughly?
Russia already occupies about 1/5, maybe 20% of Ukraine's total land. That includes Crimea, held since 2014, parts of Donbass from then too, plus the additional areas they seized in the 2022 invasion.
And we mentioned former President Trump bringing up land swapping.
Yes, he's mentioned that publicly. But, and this is crucial, the legal side of this is really significant, maybe even alarming. The Lieber Institute at West Point, they're very clear. Russia's supposed annexations have unquestionably without legal effect under international law.
So legally, they don't count.
And basically, yes.
Yeah.
And the really profound insight here is that a land for peace deal, if it's brokered under coercion from an aggressor, it's not just morally dubious, it would be void in its entirety according to the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties.
Which both sides signed.
Which both Russia and Ukraine are party to, yes.
Yeah.
International law is firm. You cannot acquire territory through the threat or use of force.
So what does that actually mean? If a deal is made, but it's legally void?
It means it might look like a pause, a temporary stop to fighting, but it's not a genuine, legally binding resolution. It could actually sow the seeds for future conflict rather than preventing it.
That's a critical distinction. Okay, so knowing international law sees it as void, why do our sources warn it could unleash, quote, catastrophic consequences for the wider world order? Why is it seen as such a dangerous precedent?
Yeah, this is probably the most important question for anyone looking at global affairs right now. The International Politic Quarterly argues that any deal involving Ukraine losing territory under duress is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because it shatters a fundamental norm we've lived by since 1945. The idea that borders aren't redrawn by force.
And if that norm breaks?
If that principle is breached, if aggression is seen to be rewarded, well, it could embolden other powerful nations with, let's say, imperial ambitions. You mentioned China and Taiwan, maybe Turkey with historical claims. They might feel encouraged to pursue their own goals by force.
Potentially sparking new conflicts all over.
Exactly. And furthermore, accepting a deal like this deeply undermines the global non-proliferation regime, that whole system trying to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Well, think about the Budapest Memorandum. Ukraine gave up its huge nuclear arsenal for security guarantees, including from Russia.
Which proved worthless.
Tragically worthless, yes. So, if losing territory becomes an accepted outcome after being attacked, why would any nation trust security guarantees anymore? Countries might just logically conclude that only having nukes guarantees their safety. It's a dangerous path.
It sounds like Putin is trying to rewind the clock.
It seems that way. Some argue he wants to return to a sort of 19th century order where war just reorganizes the world without constraints like international law or humanitarian concerns.
So this isn't just about Ukraine at all?
Not even close. It's about the very future of global stability.
That is a stark warning. The ripple effects could be truly global. But let's pivot for a moment. Beyond the international legal chess game, let's bring it back to the people at the heart of this, the Ukrainians themselves. How are they holding up under this immense pressure? And how might their resilience, or maybe their fatigue, influence the path to peace?
Yeah, and that's absolutely crucial. The sociological toll, the economic toll inside Ukraine, it's immense. The nation is deeply traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
Official military casualties, Ukraine classifies them, but U.S. intelligence estimated that back in August 2023, maybe 70,000 killed.
Yeah.
100,000 to 120,000 injured.
It's just staggering numbers.
They really are.
Mm.
And civilian deaths, over 10,000 verified, but the real number is likely much, much higher. And then you have over 14 million Ukrainians forced from their homes, refugees, internally displaced.
14 million.
And the sociological data, it's equally sobering. Something like 80% of the population experiencing significant mental health impacts. Anxiety, depression is widespread.
An economy?
Grievously wounded. Direct damage to infrastructure alone, $151 billion by late 2023. Reconstruction, estimated over $486 billion over 10 years.
Wow.
GDP slumped, as we said, over 29% in 2022. That pushed maybe 7.1 million people into poverty.
Yeah.
And demographically, the population in unoccupied areas is down to around 33 million. We've got 51 million in 1991.
Yeah.
And it's projected to fall further.
It's just an almost unimaginable human and economic cost. So how does that translate? How do the Ukrainian people feel now about continuing the war versus maybe a negotiated end, given all these burdens? Has sentiment shifted?
It really has, quite dramatically. That Gallup poll from early July is very telling. It found that a full 69% of Ukrainians now favor a negotiated end to the war as soon as possible.
69%. Wow. What was it before?
Well, compared to only 24% who still support fighting until victory. And this is almost a complete reversal from 2022.
Right.
Back then, 73% favored fighting to victory.
That's a huge swing.
It is. And this growing fatigue, the increasing impoverishment, plus you hear reports of tensions between civilian and military authorities. It could create a pretty dangerous political mix. Ukrainians have shown incredible self-organization, amazing unity, but keeping that unity going forward, that's going to be a major challenge.
And what about other internal issues? Corruption often comes up.
It does. Concerns are growing. 63% of Ukrainians identified corruption as the second biggest issue they face right after the war itself.
So, pulling all these threads together then, the international picture, the internal situation, the shifting public mood, what does this all mean for Ukraine's path forward, especially with Western support being, well, a constant variable?
Ukraine faces just immense, multifaceted challenges ahead. Restoring its parliamentary system, eventually lifting martial law, that's huge. Constitutionally, elections have to happen 6 months after martial law ends. That will likely open the door for new political players, maybe from the military, from volunteer groups.
And corruption remains key.
Critically important. The sources show voters prioritize a leader's commitment to fighting corruption even more than their grasp of economic recovery plans. It's that central. Ultimately, whatever the war's outcome looks like, Ukraine has this vital task. It must not lose the peace, meaning the rebuilding, the societal healing, the strengthening of democracy. Its allies, the West, need to act with sustained patience, generosity, sensitivity. Because the deep trauma, the public anger, maybe even resentment towards the West for perceived slow or insufficient support, that could really complicate the reforms needed.
Especially things like EU accession reforms.
Exactly. Some might see those as a kind of external governance which could face resistance. A key stabilizing factor, though, will continue to be civil society. It's been remarkable how they've stepped in to fill state gaps. But even that sector is under immense strain.
So what's the bottom line for Ukrainians themselves?
To make the immense sacrifices feel worthwhile, they need to really see that recovery is possible and that governance is getting better, demonstrably better at all levels.
So wrapping this up, the future of Ukraine, it's clearly not just a simple equation about territory or military wins and losses. It's this incredibly intricate dance, isn't it? International law, national resilience, political will, the foundations of the global order, all tangled together. It's a really stark reminder that peace, especially after a conflict like this, it's never just the absence of war. It's fragile. It needs constant vigilance, commitment, and some incredibly difficult choices.
And that really brings up an important question, I think, for you, the listener. If international law, as our sources argue, makes these coerced peace deals void and dangerous, how should the global community balance that? Balance the urgent human desire to stop the killing with the long-term need to uphold the very principles that are supposed to prevent future aggression and keep the world stable? It's a question that demands some really deep thought, well beyond the daily headlines.
Absolutely. And maybe one final thought for you to chew on as you reflect on this deep dive. Think about British history after World War II. That period of huge upheaval led to really